Well, season 4 has been a lot of fun, but it is now officially over. And is there any better way to cap off a season than with an award ceremony? I would say there is not. So today we're going to take a look back at the best and worst that season 4 had to offer, with a top 5 and bottom 5 episodes of the season. Let's start off with the number 5 worst episode of the season. Now, this was a bit of a challenge. You see, I thought that there were 6 episodes this season that were not that good, which is pretty good in terms of a season's quality. That's only a quarter of the episodes that grade is not that good, but it becomes a problem when making a top 5 list. Eventually, it came down to either Three's a Crowd or Rainbow Falls, and upon further reflection, I can't say Three's a Crowd is as bad as I thought it was. I mean, Discord still had some fun moments, and Cadence got some nice development, so Rainbow Falls it is! I've tried to be generous with this episode. I highlighted the character interactions and the inclusion of Derpy, but in the end, even I have to admit that this is not a very good episode. Almost every single character does at least one thing that makes no damn sense. Why can't Bulk Biceps fly all of a sudden? Why can't Rarity make outfits all of a sudden? Why is Fluttershy competing in a contest that should petrify her? Why is Rainbow questioning her loyalties between her friends and the Wonderbolts when she's already demonstrated that she'd pick her friends over the Wonderbolts in Wonderbolt Academy? This episode made my head hurt. But hey, at least it has Derpy. Meanwhile, on the slightly more positive list, I had a kind of difficult time coming up with the number 5 best episode as well. You see, there are 4 episodes in the top tier of the season, but that leaves the number 5 spot open for a slightly flawed but still pretty damn good episode, which makes things difficult since there were about 9 of those this season. But in the end, I decided that that spot should go to Testing, 1, 2, 3. First off, any episode that takes a shot at the janky, broken school system that I got to enjoy for the first 19 years of my life is always nice. You see, our school seemed to believe that the only viable way to learn is through Twilight's method of lecturing, flashcards, and highlighting. And if you can't learn through any of those methods, well, then clearly you're just some kind of idiot. Enjoy summer school. But this episode showed that that's only one method of learning, and in some cases, it's not the correct method. Personally, I'd say that the method that I learned from best would actually have to be Rarities, which involves finding something that does interest you as a toehold into learning more about the topic that you're trying to learn about. For example, if I had to learn about the ancient Greeks, I might start by learning about their Olympic Games, and that would get me interested in learning more about their culture in general. It doesn't work in every scenario, but when it does work, it really works. Throw in some excellent animation and the friggin' hilarious Pinkie Pie rap, and you could probably see why I love this episode so much. Before we move on to the number 4s, let's quickly take a look at the best and worst new writers of the season. This season had a lot of new writers, and unfortunately the one that I was most excited for turned in the worst performance. I'm a fan of a lot of the stuff that Scott Sonnenborn worked on before he wrote for MLP this season, but both Somebody to Watch Over Me and Treja had some particularly painful moments, and the former had very little for me to enjoy overall. I'm not ruling out the idea that he could turn this around. After all, Dave Polsky absolutely nailed it this season after 3 seasons of not nailing it. But this was an extremely weak start for Scott. On the other side, it might seem weird that I'd give the Best New Writer award to someone who's only written 1 episode, but this person's writing was unique and exciting to see. Noelle Benvenuti's writing style seems to have more dry and sarcastic humor, and Maud Pie was certainly dry and sarcastic. I really hope we get to see more from her in season 5. Back to the countdown. At number 4 on the bad list, we've got Daring Don't. My problem with this episode isn't the sudden realization that Daring Do and by extension all of her books are real. That's totally understandable. Daring Do has never done anything in her books that we've seen that demonstrates some supernatural ability. No, my big problem is with the villains in this episode, Aoi Zodal and Dr. Cabaleron. When you present Aoi Zodal as a fictional character, it works because he's the same kind of over-the-top villain that you'd see in Batman or James Bond, even though the Maniac later played that same role even better. But when Aoi Zodal becomes real and his actions are presented as something that an actual person would do, it just makes him seem like an idiot. As for Cabaleron, he didn't come off as that smart either, especially for a supposed doctor. Seriously, he fell for that disguise, which intellectually puts him on the same level as Ash Ketchum. Plus, the dialogue was sort of wonky in some places, and the rest of the main 6 besides Twilight and Rainbow contributed next to nothing. Moving on to number 4 on the best of list, we have the newest episode and the reason why this video didn't come out last week, Twilight's Kingdom. And yes, it's 1 episode for the purposes of this video, it's just easier that way. I've already done 1 video about this episode, I'm going to be part of a collab reviewing this episode later on, and I've got plans for another video based on a single moment from this episode. Maybe that's another reason why I like it so much, it just gives me so much to talk about. What else could I talk about that I haven't already mentioned and won't be bringing up in future videos? Well, the animation was the best that it's ever been, but that's simply a product of the animators getting more and more capable and comfortable with Flash. The first song was pretty good, and Cadence did sing most of her lines better than I gave her credit for last week. The second song, though, sounded kinda... Is Equestria Girlsy a word? Because if we're being totally honest, Let the Rainbow Remind You sounded an awful lot like Shake Your Tail from Rainbow Rocks. But yeah, love this episode, love the villain, love the development, love the battle, love, 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 love. Now, let's take a quick look at the best and worst writers of the season. I was actually thinking of naming Megan McCarthy as worst writer before the finale came out, but given how good that and the season premiere was, I had to rethink that. Unfortunately, I'd still have to give the award to Scott Sonnenborn. Sorry to pile on, dude. Just wasn't a fan of your work this season. On the positive side, though, it was a slugfest for Best Writer between Amy Keating Rogers and Dave Polsky. Didn't see that one coming when the season started. Amy had taken season 3 off, and before the season, Dave was seen as one of the worst writers on the staff. But I've got to give it to Amy Keating Rogers, because I just really liked all 3 of her episodes this season. Pinky Pride, Philly Vanilli, and Testing Testing 1, 2, 3. While Dave made a bunch of good episodes, but one dud in Daring Don't. Some of Amy's writing did get kinda mean-spirited at times, but I still thought all 3 episodes were great outings. Now, back to the important stuff. Number 3 worst episode is Power Ponies. Why is it that the episodes with the coolest premise always end up bombing the hardest? I mean, remember Dragon Quest? I was hyped for that episode. We were gonna find out about dragons and their culture and maybe learn a little more about Spike's past. This could have been an amazing episode. Instead, it was nothing more than a 22-minute PSA about the dangers of peer pressure and bullying. Fantastic. Similar thing happened with Power Ponies. The main 6 are superheroes. The possibilities for an episode like that are endless. But instead, the episode barely focuses on that and instead chooses to focus on Spike's seemingly never-ending attempt to get some recognition, even though he's gotten plenty of recognition and has done all kinds of important stuff and should be over this by now. Plus, for some dumb reason, most of the ponies are weaker as superheroes than they are in the real world. Kinda defeats the purpose of giving them superpowers, doesn't it? Also, I wasn't a fan of Fluttershy in this episode. Shouldn't she have hulked up after everyone got paralyzed by the hairspray? That's kind of like what happened in Dragonshy. When her friends are in danger, she gets angry and asserts herself. Oh well, at least the Maniac was awesome. And in all honesty, a premise like Main 6 being superheroes seems more appropriate on FimFiction, not on the actual show. On the other side is the number 3 best episode, which is Flight to the Finish. Hey, did you guys hear? Scootaloo's not homeless! Yay! But yeah, this is kind of a landmark episode of the series, especially for the Crusaders. It was the episode that the Crusaders stopped being bothered by Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon's blank flank comments. It was the episode that finally addressed Scootaloo's flightlessness. It was the first time Crusader members got into a fight and reconciled afterwards. Lesson 0 doesn't count. Oh, and by the way, can we talk about the fact that Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon are literally the worst thing that have ever happened to Equestria? I mean, seriously, Tyrek is looking at you two and going, dude, seriously. The fuck, man. I saw the flying ability of all the Pegasi in Equestria, but I didn't then make fun of them for being flightless. Dick move, man. Time for another quick break, this time to talk about the best and worst new characters of the season. For worst new character, it's pretty easy for me. It's gotta be Trenderhoof. I really wanted to find something interesting about this guy, but honestly, I got nothing. He's just a hipster who writes for various magazines. I have heard that Mike Vogel pitched this guy as ponified Anthony Bourdain, and quite frankly, that's an insult to Mr. Bourdain. Anthony Bourdain has personality. He's eccentric, he's weird, he's someone I'd want to watch for more than 5 seconds. Trenderhoof is just an oblivious tool who does nothing but fawn over Applejack and fail to make proper limericks. I have heard people call him racist, but that might be going a little too far. This may just be semantics, but I always associate racist with being hostile and antagonistic, like Donald Sterling. Trenderhoof is not as bad as Donald Sterling, he's just ignorant. As for best new character, this one was a showdown. Maud Pie and Seabreeze were both fantastic characters who would have run away with the award in lesser seasons, and Cheese Sandwich looked like the favorite throughout the season, but Tyrek stole the award at the last possible second. Holy crap, this guy. I've already fanboyed enough over Tyrek last week, but still, he's smart, he's powerful, he's creepy as hell. What can I say that hasn't already been said? Well, there is something that he did do that Maniac did wrong. He did monologuing right. He didn't monologue right before he set his plan into motion. He did it when he thought he had already won, when there was no chance of it biting him in the ass. As if I needed more reason to think that Tyrek was awesome. List time again. Number 2, worst episode, Simple Ways. Well, this part's going to be easy. I've already gone into great detail on why Trenderhoof was terrible, but what about the rest of the episode? Well, Rarity's gotten a major downgrade to her character in this episode. She's been attracted to other guys before, just look at Prince Blueblood, but the difference is that well, first off, Rarity wasn't creepily obsessed with Blueblood to the point of stealing some of his hair. Second, she was at least able to approach Blueblood without embarrassing herself in front of everyone with her fangirling. And when Rarity realized how much of a douche Blueblood was, she stopped talking to him. With Trenderhoof, I don't think Rarity ever realized how much of a douche he was. Also, and this is a completely unimportant nitpick, but doesn't Rarity's idea of small town chic seem a lot like the big city high society parties, like the one that she went to in Sweet and Elite? How is that small town themed again? On the far, far end of the episode goodness spectrum is the number 2 best episode of the season, Maud Pie. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Maud Pie is to me the funniest episode in the entire series. I have 3 favorite kinds of humor. Slapstick. Check. Terrible, terrible puns.
That pony is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an igneous.
Check. And humor so sarcastic it borders on anti-humor.
It doesn't talk. It's a dress.
Check. But unlike other episodes that resign themselves to be nothing more than comedic spectacles, this episode has some actual heart to it. The train scene with Pinky and Maud lasted less than 30 seconds without a single joke being told. But instead of relying on its comedy, it tugs at your heartstrings and shows just how close Pinky and Maud are. One more thing that I liked is that unlike what happened with Shining Armor and Cadance in A Canterlot Wedding, Maud was actually shown in Pinky Pride. Thanks to that one little moment, Maud doesn't feel like a character that was just pulled right out of the ether. Also, Maud placed her pet rock in front of a sandwich, and in the next scene, the sandwich was gone. You can't explain that. One more break to talk about the best and worst recurring characters of the season. For these awards, I'm looking at how much a character has either progressed or deteriorated since season 4 started. For the worst, I'd have to choose the Wonderbolts. Honestly, these guys have grown worse and worse every season, but going into season 4, they still seemed like an appealing group to be a part of. Rainbow Dash had to knock some sense into them in Wonderbolt Academy, but still, Spitfire seemed to learn a lesson. But in Rainbow Falls, any sense of likability that the Wonderbolts had disappeared. Fleetfoot in particular seems to come off as a scheming a-hole who cares more about winning than her comrades, which kinda goes against a couple of the themes of the show. That might be why I laughed my ass off when we saw Fleetfoot nearly on the verge of tears when Spike was singing the Cloudsdale anthem. I ain't even mad. As for best recurring character, I went with a kind of bizarre choice. I could have gone with Twilight, as she's gone from freshly minted Alicorn to the Princess of Friendship, but honestly, we only saw that progression in a couple of episodes of hers. Every other time we saw her, people didn't notice her princessness, she didn't want people to notice her princessness, or she actively seemed to go against her princessness. No. I went with someone who's become a much more fully realized character this season, and got loads of progression to her character in every episode she was a major part of. Sweetie Belle. On February 9th, I uploaded a video talking about the Cutie Mark Chronicles. In it, I mentioned that Sweetie Belle hadn't had an episode of her own in forever, specifically going all the way back to early Season 2 in Sisterhoof Social. At the time, the only thing we knew about Twilight Time was its name, and we knew even less about for whom the Sweetie Belle toils. Now? Let's just see what she's accomplished in just those 2 episodes. She's learned how to use her magic, enjoyed the highs and lows of popularity, learned a lesson about being friends with people for who they are, not what they are, wrote, directed, and acted in a play she made herself, learned that Rarity isn't trying to upstage her at every turn, and saved her sister's fashion career. And that's just in those 2 episodes. She got a lot more development in Flight to the Finish and Some Pony to Watch Over Me. So, yep, new favorite Crusader, one of my favorite characters on the show now. It's set in stone. Alright, here we are. Time for the big ones. The best and worst episodes of Season 4. Starting with the worst episode of the season. And it would have to be Some Pony to Watch Over Me. I already did a review of this episode with Clifford Beats, but here's the gist of it. Applejack is an overprotective helicopter parent completely out of nowhere. The Chimera was cool at first and had potential but lost a lot of its creepiness when it started talking. Apple Bloom had some smart moments in the first act and in the early part of the second when she was calling out AJ on her bullshit, but even she wasn't exempt from the stupid stick, which ended up justifying AJ's irrational behavior. The moral was utter tripe on a pogo stick, and AJ received no punishment for driving her sister to run away from home. It's bad, but this show has done much, much worse. So honestly, this episode would barely crack the top 10 worst of the series. And now, the best episode. And honestly, this should come as no surprise since this is pretty much everyone's favorite episode of the season, Pinkie Pride. This is another episode that I collabed on, this time with Golden Fox and Toon Critic. Basic gist, freaking amazing! Weird Al put in a wonderful performance as Cheese Sandwich, Pinkie Pie acted in a believable and interesting manner, the songs were god tier, especially the Goof Off on the happy end, Pinkie's Lament on the sad end, and Make a Wish, which is the song that every song from Equestria Girls wishes it could be. This episode is just freaking awesome. I mentioned halfway through the season that Pinkie Pride was climbing up the best of the series list, and since then it's moved all the way up to my third favorite episode of the series. In fact, let's take another look at my best and worst of the series lists. This season there were 3 episodes that cracked my top 10 of the series, and Twilight's Kingdom was insanely close to being the 4th. On the worst of list though, Some Pony to Watch Over Me was the only episode to join that list this season, and only barely. Back in that mid-season video, I said that if the season keeps going at the pace that it's on, Season 4 would be my favorite in the series. Well, after that spectacular finale, that sentiment has been confirmed. Season 4 is my favorite season of Friendship is Magic so far, and I cannot wait to see if Season 5 is going to be able to top it. It'll be difficult, but I'd love to see him try. See y'all later.